So Skepta is an artist that I've been following since around sometime in 2016 when he dropped his Konnichiwa album. There's a video I have on that. It's trash, but it's still up. Listening to Konnichiwa gave me a really huge respect for artists from the UK, internationally, and everything like that, because it was a genre of music which was grime at the time that was first introduced to me that culturally I feel so many Americans are just like absent to and unaware of. I thought that there was really no way that music that was made in that vein could exist and be so absent to me, yet at the same time so accessible. Hearing his work on Konnichiwa made me go back to his previous albums and previous mixtapes and projects to make me check out projects like Blacklisted from 2012. After that, stayed updated with Skepta's releases and came across his Vicious EP, and there were a couple of bangers off that joint that I really enjoyed that gave me heavy grime influence, but I don't feel like it was long enough to give me the completion that Konnichiwa did. So here we are at Skepta's new release, Ignorance is Bliss, and again, what can you expect? Skepta's had a lot of things happen to him within recent years that have kind of shaped the idea for what would be Ignorance is Bliss. The album briefly discusses Skepta's newfound outlook on life now that he's entered fatherhood. Many times on this project, he'll go from an introspective adult giving you that grown man talk about the stresses of the music industry and reflecting on life beyond the rebellious grime stage of his career on tracks like Going Through It, to a famous rapper who doesn't seem to own a mirror or know what it is on a track like You Wish. Both of these add to the duality of Skepta, but don't necessarily seem to be the central focus of the project, as it doesn't seem to follow a particular narrative or theme throughout. The darker, more digital electronic influence is still there in this style of hip-hop. The slight choppiness, the lack of imperfection in the computerized instrumentals, the overall consistency of the beats themselves. So it seemed to me, rather than the harsher, more in-your-face style that we've come to know of grime music, and even on Skepta's own work Konnichiwa, this seems to be more the art of someone who's trying to subtly alter its direction to kind of change our expectations of it. I'd argue the style of grime is that of one that's supposed to be a bit more rebellious. Even Skepta embodied the spirit of that by illegally performing one of his biggest singles, Shutdown in Shortage. Bullet from a Gun is an example of the more introspective, more reflective Skepta, reflecting on his past, reviewing the state of the world. I really like how Skepta basically says it's not in his nature to whine about how he was raised because he sees himself as a king right now. No Sleep is another example of that digital, more modernized production. I actually really enjoy this track because his delivery hits the drops right on time. The lyrics are both instructional and inspirational, as he tells his listeners not to live beyond their means. It ain't overnight to get from the bottom to the top. There's a lot of shit in between. The subtle iPhone layered in the instrumental and the beat itself has a lot of momentum. The tempo and the overall theme of this track seems to be that of one that's very alarming, kind of telling you to get your shit together. The Asian-like melody on Redrum with these heavy distorted 808s are cool, and key doesn't sound too out of place. The I'll slap you like Ike Turner line is as obnoxious as it is catchy. And overall, I like the idea of a more mature Skepta, reflecting on things that he used to do and coming into this new project with a more tame sound, one that's a little bit more mature and on his grown man shit. But I do think that's a strength and a weakness, as a lot of the production on this project can sound very bland, very simple, and oddly reminiscent. Glow in the Dark and You Wish, for example, share extreme similarities. You Wish just having a stronger grime influence, sharper snares, and a slightly different tempo. I know many will argue that this album is grown and he's having more fun while explaining the life after adolescent fame, but the album, when it comes to the sound of grime, is very minimal. Don't get me wrong, I don't have a problem with Skepta experimenting different sonically, but I feel like that grime, that heavy influence of grime in his music gave him a stronger sense of self, because the way he described himself on projects like that, though very cliche in a lot of ways, seemed to be very passionate. Here it isn't as blatant as I feel it ought to be. The sound is still there of grime, but it's a bit more toned down, almost muzzled. Certainly not as in your face as a track like Shutdown. And even again, I'd probably give Skepta a pass on that if there weren't examples of trap on this project. The features make Skepta a breath of fresh air, which is cool for Skepta, I guess, but in terms of overall song enjoyability are moments I'd rather skip through to get back to Skepta, especially when we have the Nave Smalls auto-tune feature that sounds like an odd combination of an old Travis Scott flow and Nav delivery on Greaze Mode. This sounds like a track you'd find if you typed in ASAP type beat. Not only instrumentally is this track just bare and reminiscent of everything that's already going on in America right now, but this is one of the first of many examples of Skepta dipping his hand into the cookie jar of rap cliche. I just made your girl my girl. She on her knees. Get it? Cause I took your bit. A good deal of these tracks are kind of reminiscent and almost interchangeable with a good deal of the tracks from Blacklisted from 2012, which yes means I'm saying that they take very little risks. I get that this album being a bit more cautious conceptually and hinting at the idea of Skepta's distrust of not only the world but the government and the music industry is gonna make this album, when it comes to the song, sound a bit emotionally absent. But when we got Konnichiwa 3 years ago, an album that was so external and superficial, to an album like this, not only where he's dimmed the instrumentals almost to the extent of ridding the grime he's pushed for so many years, but kind of set the stage to be a bit more confessional, wouldn't it make more sense to peer a bit deeper? At least a bit deeper than lines like, always been a daredevil man, I was born from pain. We know Skepta, but we don't know how, we don't know why, and we don't know when. Skepta sounds distant when he tries to pierce through the first layer of skin. It's more like he just pokes and prods at the outermost layer when we get lines like, man, I've been going through it, I don't want to talk about it, I don't want to get into it. Into what? You haven't told us shit. That's really my issue with this project, is I get how it's a grown-up project for Skepta. He's closing in on 40 soon, speaking with a lot of authority and confidence on this project. It makes sense for a 36-year-old rapper to be grown out of his rebellious stage. But usually once grown out of that rebellious stage, even though Skepta says, the new me learned from the old me, we don't really see that many examples of such, primarily because Skepta refuses to allow himself to go much deeper than the outermost layer. He hints at anxiety, he hints at stress, he hints at problems that he's dealing with, but never confesses to any of them. Which, again, the toned down, more dimly lit production on this project is the center stage for. I feel like ignorance truly is bliss, because I don't really know much more about Skepta on this project, despite it being or wanting to be more introspective than his last, than the content that we got on his last. This album isn't bad, but it's just hard for me to get connected to anything. So it's hard for me to say that there are many tracks on this project that I'd even return to. There are bangers on this project, clearly. I mean, Skepta's always been that kind of artist. I just feel like if at least he was a little bit more cliche on previous projects, he was at least a bit more passionate about them. When it comes to being introspective, it just seems like he'd rather not. Skepta, ignorance is bliss. Thank you for watching. Let me know how you felt about this project in the comment section down below. I'll see you all next time, and I'm out. Peace.